Hi, I want to give you some practical ideas for teaching one-to-one classes. Because teaching a single student is more authentic and a more natural way towards second language acquisition, I'd like to explore a more naturalistic approach. Teaching unplugged is a way to make learning more genuine and closer to the way we learn our own mother tongue. Now, it's often drilled into us teachers that our starting point when planning a lesson is the grammar and the vocabulary that we want to teach. We, as the teacher, have all the knowledge and we pass it down to our passive student, using textbooks, worksheets, grammar exercise books. But with a single student, it gives us the opportunity to draw English language directly out of the learner herself, and then use the words the student produces as the basis of our lesson. This is Scott Thornberry's idea of teaching unplugged. The classes are based on a conversation rather than a text in a book. The teacher doesn't rely on textbooks and worksheets and instead focuses on improving and correcting the language the student produces. Now, a great way to get a student talking is questions, but there are problems with this approach. It's a matter of asking the right questions in the right way. And until you get very slick at classroom questioning, write your questions down in a notebook, script your side of the conversation. If you want the students to speak enough to give you a chunk of language to work with, closed questions will not produce what you're looking for. The student will answer yes, no, or I don't know. But these are good to get the student speaking initially. Open questions are better, but they will only elicit a short phrase or a single sentence at the very best. Why and how will elicit a reason or an explanation, and you'll get a sentence or two. But the best way to elicit a long answer is not a question at all. It's an instruction to speak. Whereas it's good to mix your question forms, your mantra should be tell me about, tell me about. You can generate language about anything. Tell me about your sleep last night. Tell me about the film we just watched. In short, the more a student speaks, the more errors he makes. And the more errors he makes, the more material that you have to work with. As you can't have student pair and group work with a single student, inevitably you will speak more in a classroom than with groups of learners. There are some techniques you can use though to get more student talk time. The first tip I can give you is give the students time to think before they respond to your questions. Do not be afraid of silence. Give students 5 to 10 seconds to think and formulate a response. If 10 to 15 seconds pass before your student volunteers an answer, then rephrase your question. Do not give in to the temptation to answer your own questions. This will condition your student to hesitate before answering, to see if you will simply supply the answer. Patience is the key. Don't be afraid of silence. The longer that you wait for students to respond, the more thoughtful and complex the responses are likely to be. And beware of jumping in with your opinions. The student might just echo your point of view to make their life easier. Single word prompts are great. For example, the student might say, I loved the trip to town this morning. And you can say, because the church was beautiful and the shopping was great, but it was a bit crowded and it was difficult to walk on the pavement. It sounds a bit contrived, but it really does work. Also, focus on your active listening skills. Ask lots of questions to clarify and check understanding. Reflective listening is a great skill to master. You listen, then mirror or summarize what the student has just said, but paraphrasing while you go. For example, the student might say, I loved the trip to the town this morning, but it was a bit crowded. It was difficult to walk on the pavement. You reply, So what you're saying is it was hard to move around because of all the people. This technique really encourages empathy and makes the student want to expand on their answer. Empathy is vital to good communication, to the point of mirroring your student's pace of speaking, their demeanour and their body language. Eye contact, nodding, verbal cues like uh-huh, oh really, go on, are simple ways of increasing that student talk time. And like any skill, active listening skills need constant practice. So should we look at some practical ideas for you to move away from textbooks and worksheets? Now, simply asking your student to talk is a great start. Ask the students to talk about an aspect of their life or interests. Use instructions to speak and one-word prompts to get her to open up. While she's talking, you can make notes on her performance, errors in vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation and style. And then at the end of this first phase, you can go through the issues that arose and help her with the errors she made. Make sure you get her to practice using the correct forms at this point. And finally, get the student to do the same or a similar task again, and you monitor to what extent she has improved. Essentially, this is a test, teach, test approach, which has the benefit of allowing the student to see their improvement immediately. Get the student to give a summary of each day's lesson. This way he focuses on thinking about how he's learning and progressing. Use personal photographs. These may be of friends, family, day out, holiday. They provide personal stimulation for discussion that is real and meaningful for the students, and with smartphones in their pockets, these are available in an instant. Photos on phones can also be taken of parts of the local area and trips out, parts of your day, and then this will link the lesson to the course. Social media is incredibly important to teenagers. There has been research available for a while to show that this generation of digital natives really have different brains to our generation. They learn by hypertexting, multitasking and networking, using images rather than text. If social networking revolution has passed you by, now would be the time to catch up. Have students bring in something that they have read recently that is of personal interest to them, not something they were told to read by a teacher, or an object from their culture, a souvenir, whatever form it may take, and have them tell you about it. What it is, what's it about, why they like it. It's all about personalisation, the student having some control over the content of their lesson. Your student can keep a vocabulary notebook. Now there's a video on the homepage of Saul's training video website explaining how best to do this. Each day your student can bring into class 3 phrases or idioms or words she's noticed to discuss and share. A mood graph can spark a conversation. This also gives you valuable feedback about how your student is feeling. Also, a written journal is a good idea. This gives you a chance to correct the writing, and it provides material to write an email home in English or make a simple website. I would recommend Wix. It's free and it's so easy to use. Now, in part 2 of this video, I'm going to give you some specific activities that you can adapt or that you can use, which use very few materials. Thank you for listening. See you in part 2.